Hello everybody, welcome back to a new episode of D&D Creature Feature. This is the show where I read you a creepypasta based on Dungeons & Dragons. And at the end of the video, you're going to get something like the stat block of a monster or a new playable species for you to use in your own Dungeons & Dragons games so you can terrify your players to hell and back for no reason. Also, this series has its own continuity, so if you want to know what the heck is going on or who these two handsome people on screen are, might I suggest looking at the playlist that you can find on my channel with all the other creepypastas in it. So, without further ado, let's get into tonight's story. The Slender Stalker. The task sounded simple at first. This apparently really rich person, who called themselves E.H., sent us a mysterious letter in which they offered us 50,000 gold pieces for retrieving a few sheets of paper from the forest just outside the town we were in. Valorie was immediately suspicious of this letter, because neither of us could understand why this E.H. character would choose to hire a pair of mediocre indie authors to do this job instead of actually competent mercenaries or sellswords. But at the end of the day, our greed got the better of us, and we decided to do what this person asked of us. The forest itself was kind of confusing and weird. All the trees were evenly spaced out and it got dark about 15 feet in. That place was eerie as can be, and I was half expecting that freaky Wendigo thing to suddenly jump scare me at any given moment. Although the only hurdle we faced on our strange little escapade turned out to be some kind of goblinoid creature, which was pretty easy to defeat. Eventually, we reached the ruin of a dilapidated fort or castle, and there we discovered the sheets of paper described in the letter just kind of hung up on the walls. There were around 7 or 8 pieces of paper that looked like they were ripped out of an old book and covered in runic symbols that didn't make sense to either of us. Finally, the two of us made it out of the forest without any struggle and the pages in hand. The letter from E.H. detailed that they'd hire us a chariot so we could make our way to their chateau, located in some small seaside town we've never heard of. When we were standing in front of the comfortable, fancy chariot, and I was about to step inside, Valorie gently tugged on my scarf and whispered, "Ed, I don't know if we should get in this carriage. This whole thing just seems so suspicious to me." "Well, we went through the trouble to get these pages already. Might as well cash in the reward," I replied. "My gods, Eddie, you are stupid. But fine, I'll come with you just so I can say I told you so when it turns out to be a trap," my adopted sister stated in a very snarky manner. So, against basic logic, we climbed into the vehicle and asked the coachman to drive us to our intended destination. It didn't take long at all for Val to make herself at home in the same wagon that she had theorized to be an attempt at our lives mere moments ago. "I'm sorry I doubted your judgment, Eddie. This is pretty damn luxurious," she giggled before dedicating herself back to the book she was reading. I simply snickered in response to her comment and decided to pull these pieces of paper out of our bag of holding and regard them, trying to decipher the glyphs written on them. Even though my efforts weren't particularly fruitful, there was something strangely familiar about them. After I gave up on trying to read the symbols on the pages, I simply stared through the window of the carriage, lost in thought. But all of the sudden, sometime around the dusk hours, I noticed something. For a minute, I could have sworn that I saw a person standing on the side of the road, just watching us. Therefore, I turned to Valorie to tell her about the mysterious figure. But when I took a second peek out of the window, it was gone. "Ed, is everything alright?" Val asked. Oh, yeah, everything's fine. It's just I think I saw something, but it was probably just my imagination. I frantically answered, unsure if I even believed what I was saying. "Well, alright then," Valorie mumbled, slightly alarmed, before she attempted to continue reading her literature. The sight of this person was so strange to me. For the remainder of the ride on the chariot, I constantly gazed out of the window, frequently thinking to have seen the silhouette again, but quickly realizing that it was just my paranoia playing tricks on me each time. I tried my best to recall what this person looked like, but found that I hadn't gotten a good look at them at all. The only characteristic of the figure that I was able to recall was that they were tall, abnormally tall. Eventually, the carriage stopped in front of a small wooden tavern, and the coachman informed us that we'd stop here for the night and that E.H. had already agreed to pay for our rooms. Sure, the tavern was a bit run down and kind of creepy, but getting to spend a night in such an establishment without needing to pay even a copper piece sounded like a pretty sweet deal. The inside looked just as one would expect a tavern like this to look. There were a bunch of standing tables with a few people chugging ale and loudly chatting. On the wall, there was a bulletin board with various flyers and reports about creepy things like cattle mysteriously dying, people being picked off by some large creature in the woods, and a man being stalked by some mysterious, slender figure. Out of nowhere, I heard Val's voice call out to me, "Ed, look through the window!" Unassumingly, I did exactly that, and immediately jumped in fright as I saw the figure standing directly outside of the window pane for a split second and disappearing right after. "Yo, Eddie, are you good?" Val questioned in concern. I guess I'm fine, but didn't you just tell me to look out the window?" I interrogated my sister, resulting in her slowly shaking her head and proclaiming, no? To say that I was freaked out would be a vast understatement. Soon, the tavern keeper assigned us 2 rooms, one for the driver of the carriage and the other for me and Valorie. As my sister and I walked up the stairs to the 2nd floor where the sleeping quarters were located, I pondered on everything that had happened this evening. I was certain that I had actually seen this creature and that it was following me. I had seen its inhumanly tall body and lanky limbs and stared into its hollow, silvery eyes through the tavern window. But the more I thought about it, the less sense it all made. If this figure was standing directly in front of the aforementioned tavern window, then why had nobody else seen it? And why had I heard Valorie's voice when she hadn't actually said anything? It just didn't add up. In all honesty, I was starting to think that I might just be going insane and had imagined the whole thing. It was already in the middle of the night when Valorie and I went to sleep. Our beds were placed adjacent to opposite walls of the room, and there was no other furniture in the room, giving it this eerie feeling of emptiness. It's kind of hard to properly describe. Sleep didn't really find me that night. I had my eyes pressed tightly shut and my blanket wrapped around me like some kind of cocoon as I desperately tried to fall asleep. But that wasn't an easy feat because every tiny noise gave me chills. Eventually, I heard the sound of footsteps and creaking floorboards as Valorie exited the room, presumably to use the restroom or something. I was now completely alone in the room, and as paranoid as ever that the creature might just appear in the small chamber. Outside it had begun to heavily rain, and occasionally a flash of distant lightning illuminated the room, revealing various shadows that my horrible imagination warped to look like the outlines of tall, slender humanoids. All of this just felt really stupid and babyish to me, and I wish that I could have just taken a second to think rationally about this like a normal person. So I realized that I really needed to calm down and gather myself in order to not let my irrational and idiotic fears get the better of me. I thought about everything that had happened today and came to the conclusion that all of this madness began after Valorie and I found those pages with the strange glyphs on them. Perhaps they were magical somehow and caused me to hallucinate throughout the day. So I carefully got out of bed, silently tiptoed over to the bag of holding that we were keeping them in, and took another good look at them. Upon inspecting the old crusty paper for a little longer, one thing became increasingly clear, and I felt so stupid for not noticing it before. These were spell scrolls, but they didn't belong to any school of magic that I was familiar with, and I still had no idea what specific magical effects they had. Perhaps my theory was right, and so I felt a huge weight being lifted off my shoulders. Contently, I looked up from the pieces of paper, and my heart slowly sank after I realized that I might not be alone in the room. One of the corners of the room that was completely shrouded in shadow now appeared to be occupied by a lanky figure that was gazing directly at me. The wooden floor began to crunch as it stepped closer, and its head bent to the side, accompanied by a faint cracking noise. Suddenly, this cold shiver of looming dread crept throughout my whole body, and my head started to hurt as the creature slowly stepped closer and closer. The monstrously tall figure that had apparently stalked me throughout the day had chalk-white skin, no hair on its head, and these sulky, sunken, silvery, piercing, cold eyes. It was wearing some kind of black clothing with a red scarf wrapped around its neck. But the worst part were the black, slimy tentacles that grew out of its back and subtly twitched like writhing snakes. I was overcome by terror and just sat on the floor, muttering largely unintelligible nonsense as the creature slowly inched towards me. Its spindly fingers reached out to me, and I thought that was the end. But it wasn't. During this encounter, I had barely even noticed that I was tightly clutching the spell scrolls in my hand. The creature didn't even touch me, but simply grabbed these enigmatic pieces of paper, stepped back, and looked at me for a moment. It was then that I realized that its facial expression had this whiff of overwhelming sadness to it. Do those belong to you? I tremblingly mumbled, dreading that the creature could suddenly change its mind and cleave my head off, with its sharp fingernails. Yes, the figure responded with a very silent and echoey voice. Thank you. In that moment, I felt pure relief flow through me. I didn't care anymore that we wouldn't be able to cash in the reward, because I was just unspeakably glad to have survived that. For a moment, I closed my eyes and breathed out before noticing that the figure had disappeared, leaving no trace of it ever being there in the first place. Okay, so I bet you were thinking that this video was going to have the stat block of a monster, right? Think again! I'm giving you an entirely new playable species based on Slenderman. I really think that this character is such an iconic CreepyPasta monster that I really had to do him justice when I made him into a D&D thing. And I think there is plenty of people out there who would really like to play a character like this. So without further ado, let me show you the lore and the abilities I wrote for this dude. And yeah, that about does it for tonight's episode of D&D Creature Feature. I hope that you all liked the Slender folk. And it would be really amazing if someone would play this or use this in their campaigns and then tell me in the comments of how the other players reacted. That would just be really awesome to me. And I hope you also like this series as a whole, because I have plans to make it into this more overarching narrative moving forward. So as long as you keep watching my silly little videos, I'm gonna keep making them. That's it, stay spooky, and peace out, fellas. Bye!